From religious freedom to reclaiming broken cities for God. Welcome to this Faith Nation special of stories from around the world. I'm Brody Carter. Well, China and Russia have long topped lists of the worst violators of religious freedom. A more recent addition to the State Department's annual report, Afghanistan. In tonight's top story, Abigail Robertson has more on the countries engaged in the most egregious violations of religious freedom and the United States response.
This year's release opened on a positive note, highlighting certain progress worldwide in the expansion of religious freedom, like Iraq's first invitation to the Pope to visit the country.
This report is about spreading that kind of progress to more parts of the world.
Secretary of State Blinken sees the impact of the historic papal visit as profound.
He sent a message not only to Iraqis, but to the whole world that Islam and other religions can sit together peacefully.
Still, the report reveals much work to be done, calling out many repeat offenders like China for religious freedom violations.
China continues its genocide and repression of predominantly Muslim Uyghurs and other religious minority groups. Since April 2017, more than 1 million Uyghurs, ethnic Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and others have been detained in internment camps in Xinjiang.
International Religious Freedom Ambassador Rashad Hussain claims Russia has doubled down on violations since invading Ukraine in March.
President Putin sought to justify the unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine through the blatantly false pretext of denazification.
The report also highlighted how religious freedom has deteriorated since the Taliban regained control of Afghanistan in 2021.
The Taliban regime and rival militant group ISIS-K have detained, intimidated, threatened, and attacked members of religious minority communities.
Hussain says thanks to technology and social media, the U.S. has more allies helping combat religious freedom violators than ever before.
We have mechanisms to shed light on abuses taking place, and we have the means to hold bad actors accountable.
Secretary Blinken and Ambassador Hussain both emphasized America's commitment to protecting and advancing religious freedom rights around the world and urged foreign governments to speak out and protect the most vulnerable. Reporting from Washington, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
When the United States withdrew from Afghanistan, there was a massive shift in America's intelligence community. As national security correspondent Caitlin Burke reports, eyes that once monitored Afghan threats are now refocusing on communist China.
U.S. intelligence experts are in the business of adapting. During the Cold War, the focus turned to Russia. After 9/11, the priorities switched to counterterrorism. Now a new era is underway.
We see a pivot back towards great power conflict, Russia and China in particular, but also Iran and North Korea. Challenges from nation states, not from terrorist organizations.
Former CIA officer Paul Colby, now an intelligence expert at Harvard, says China in particular will be a long-term focus.
China represents an enduring threat. So for the next 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, 50 years, we're going to be having some of the same discussions.
To counter Beijing, intelligence agencies have quietly moved hundreds of officers and major resources to this threat. Last October, the CIA launched the China Mission Center, a unit focusing explicitly on Beijing. The CIA is also making emerging technologies a priority, given how the Chinese have used it as a primary means of espionage.
The Chinese have shown that they are willing to pursue our personal data at a scale unlike anything anywhere else in the world.
FBI Director Christopher Wray says China holds more U.S. corporate and international data than any other country combined, and regularly targets U.S. government, infrastructure, and research. Intelligence officials also believe this data is gathered through apps like TikTok.
If you can collect that massive amount of data on a regular basis, just using artificial intelligence and other analytic tools, there's tremendous advantages if you can get that.
Collecting data on Beijing, however, is no easy feat. China is a closed authoritarian state with a massive surveillance apparatus and major restrictions on what's allowed in and out of the country. Colby says the U.S. will need to take a play from their book to be effective.
To understand what's happening in China, to understand their capabilities, and to understand their plans and intention, what's in Xi Jinping's head, That requires a large, focused, patient intelligence collection effort.
Even as more attention shifts to China, intelligence officials say fighting al-Qaeda and other terror groups remains a top priority. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
A safe haven amid a humanitarian crisis. Next on Faith Nation, how a church in Mexico is reaching refugees trying to make it to America. A God-given dream led Gustavo Banda to start a small church in Tijuana, Mexico. He never imagined it would become a refugee for tens of thousands of migrants seeking freedom in America. George Thomas shares how that dream became a reality.
6 miles from Tijuana and a short distance from the U.S.-Mexico border lies one of this city's poorest neighborhoods.
This area is on the outskirts of the city. Not everyone knows about it. Not everyone wants to come here either.
It's easy to see why. There are no paved roads. The hillside is strewn with garbage. There's no sewage system here, and crime is rampant.
When we moved here, there were only cows, horses, chickens, and people with a lot of needs.
In 2011, Gustavo Banda and his wife, Zaida Gulen, moved to Canon de Alacran, or Scorpion's Canyon, after hearing from the Lord in a dream.
It was a clear mandate from God to move here, even though there was absolutely nothing in this place.
Teachers by trade, the Mexican couple were touched by the overwhelming needs of the community. Most folks here were poor subsistence farmers.
God gave me a dream that I had to build a church. We worked for 8 months, day and night. We knew God was going to do something special, but nobody had a clue about what really was going to happen.
That year, Templo Embajadores de Jesus, or Ambassadors of Jesus, was born in the heart of Scorpion's Canyon. Banda held services on Sunday, then hit the rugged roads the rest of the week, going house to house, ministering to physical and spiritual needs.
We shared the love of Jesus with them. It was a mandate from God that we had to go to the poor.
In 2016, that focus drastically changed when thousands of Haitians, escaping poverty and back-to-back natural disasters, began to carve a dangerous 7,000-mile path to the U.S.-Mexico border. Many landed on the church's doorsteps, less than 30 minutes from the San Isidro border.
Within months, 22,000 Haitians had arrived in the city of Tijuana.
The church became a place of refuge.
I did not know, nor did I ever imagine, that there would be so many people in the church.
Since then, Banda has opened his church doors to migrants from all parts of the world.
It started with migrants coming from Haiti, Africa, Pakistan, and the Middle East. Today, we mainly have people from El Salvador, Guatemala, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Colombia, and some from Mexico. It's hard to tell, but we estimate about 35,000 people have come through the church, easily.
1,200 were staying in the church the day CBN News visited.
We feed them 3 times a day. We try to help them with all their needs. At nighttime, the entire church becomes one big giant dorm, where everyone sets up their beds on the floor, and sometimes there's no room to even walk on the floor.
Redding Castillo from Honduras has been here for 4 months. He says gangs killed his father and threatened to take his life as well.
Thank God that I'm not in danger anymore. They are not sending me the threatening messages like they used to.
24-year-old Jacqueline Ortiz from Guatemala is here with her 2 girls.
I'm so thankful to God because if these doors of the church weren't open, I don't know where I would be. I don't go hungry here. My daughters don't go hungry. We have a warm place, we have a roof, and all thanks to God and to the people that help us.
Most migrants stay here an average of 6 months before trying to legally cross the border. Church volunteers run a school for the children, oversee computer training, and provide other skills that will help migrants prepare for their new life in America. Area churches and NGOs also pitch in with food and other essential supplies.
The most important thing for the migrants to know when they get here is that there is hope, and although they have left their families behind, all of us that are here have become their family.
Come Sunday, everyone picks up their bed and dresses up for a lively church service.
I know that I only have a little bit of time with them, so my job is for them to know as much as they can about Jesus, baptize them, and send them to the United States believing in Jesus.
Pastor Gustavo started the church back in 2011 with no idea that he would be housing thousands of migrants from around the world. So today, 10 years later, a new structure is going up, which will be the future home for the migrants. He once had a desire to be a missionary to Haiti. Not anymore.
I even started learning a little bit of their language, but when I wanted to go to Haiti, Haiti came to me. And after Haiti came, all the other nations started coming to this place. I don't have the numbers, but for years we have been baptizing so many of them, and many more are surrendering to Jesus. And that's my calling now.
George Thomas, CBN News, in Scorpions Canyon, Tijuana, Mexico.
Dutch farmers take up the fight. How they say their government is using climate change to take their land, and the concern that same could be here after this. Welcome back. In the Netherlands, farmers are taking their tractors out of the fields and into the streets. They're protesting a government plan to shrink their farms and take their land, all in the name of climate change. Dale Hurd explains how what's unfolding there could soon happen here at home.
The most efficient system in history of growing food and getting it to consumers, modern farming, is under attack, blamed for causing climate change. The world has watched as Dutch farmers fight for their economic survival against demands that they shrink their operations to suit the government's climate change agenda. The government has told farmers to cut ammonia emissions by 50%, and those near protected areas must reduce their operations by as much as 95%. Or they must sell their land to the government and face a lifetime ban from farming. Farmers responded by spraying government buildings with manure, and police shot at this 16-year-old boy. Jos Ubels, vice president of the Farmers Defense Force in the Netherlands, tells us negotiations are not going anywhere, and a bad situation is continuing to escalate.
We are fighting for our rights to produce and to live as a human being in our country, in a democracy, where we have the right to go on the street to protest against legislations, and we have the right to produce via our permits. If you check our production rates and how we work, we produce very high level, very high scale, good healthy food, traceable, all with a little environmental impact.
Farmers around the world who are also seeing their way of life under attack have demonstrated in solidarity.
American farmers who are already subject to a host of regulations could face even more restrictions. But politicians should view what happened in Sri Lanka as a cautionary tale.
Sri Lanka's ban of chemical fertilizers in farming caused the struggling nation's agricultural sector and then its economy to collapse. It ended with protesters frolicking in the presidential swimming pool after the nation's leader fled the country. Sri Lanka was supposed to be the poster child of modern organic farming. The World Economic Forum even proudly posted this article about Sri Lanka's future success, written by the Prime Minister whose house was set on fire by protesters. Parts of the world already face famine because of a shortage of chemical fertilizer due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The same kind of fertilizer environmentalists want to reduce. Washington attorney Gary Bass, who helped start the Environmental Protection Agency in 1970 and now says it should be abolished because it's Orwellian, owns 11 farms in Illinois. He calls what the Dutch government is trying to do to its farming sector madness, and sees signs a similar movement is coming to the U.S.
Agriculture is an easy target, both from the animal standpoint and from guys like me who put a lot of anhydrous ammonia on their corn crop. They're going after methane, which is belched by cows. AOC has it wrong. They do not FART, the methane, they belch it.
Base believes the era of cheap food at the grocery store is over, not just from inflation, but because of growing environmental regulations on farming, and says Sri Lanka should be a warning to leaders who want to experiment with food production.
That's what happens when you don't have food.
Nevertheless, the Biden administration appears to be coming after farmers. Steve Malloy, editor of the website junkscience.com, writes that a new study by the EPA claims that farm dust kills 17,000 Americans per year, the same EPA standards that basically killed the coal industry.
These are people who want to control every aspect of our lives, and that includes energy production and use and food use. They believe food production is a major contributor to global warming. They're not going to give up on agriculture. They don't like agriculture.
Former U.S. Ambassador to the Netherlands, Piet Hoekstra, says if the Dutch government wins this battle against its farmers, who are the second largest exporters of agricultural products in the world behind the United States, it will only make the global food shortage worse.
The Dutch will not experience food shortages, but there may be other parts of the world that will, because this food is going to go away.
Any government willing to risk its food supply in order to fight climate change might want to keep Sri Lanka in mind. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Coming up, if a picture says 1,000 words, 1 million photos must have quite the story to tell. How images captured the rebirth of Israel. Before cell phone pictures or digital cameras, photographs helped document life. In Israel, millions of photos are helping provide a pictorial history of the Holy Land. Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell brings us this look at one group's ongoing effort to chronicle the story of the Jewish state.
This may look like a storage room full of old files, although in reality, it's a treasure trove providing a pictorial history of Israel.
We're at the heart of the archive, at the photo archive. This is the place where we can find printed photographs taken from early 20th century and all the way till the end of the printed material era.
Decades before the Jewish state's birth, Karen Kayemet, La Israel, Jewish National Fund, or KKL-JNF, was breaking ground.
KKL-JNF is an organization that was established 120 years ago, aimed at purchasing land in Eretz Israel, right here in Israel, and also developing it, which means preparing the land after purchasing it for housing, building new communities, helping people get here so they can fully establish and inhabit these homes.
Efrat Sinai, head of KKL-JNF Photo Archive, says cameras have continued snapping history since the beginning.
KKL-JNF used to send photographers to different corners all over Israel so they can capture what is going on, the places that are being built and established, the faces of the pioneers, all that spirit of creating something new. And that's what created this unique and very important collection.
One of Sinai's favorites is this unique pose of David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister.
It's not something that we're used to seeing him with cool sunglasses. There's another picture, which I really like. It's David Ben-Gurion on the day of the Declaration of Independence, while he's still working out the draft of that declaration.
And a year later, on Israel's first birthday.
These are photographs from the very first year of the celebration in 1949. As you can see, bringing the Torah books. And what I wanted to show you was the military parades that were taking place in the big cities. We can see how everyone used to go out to the balconies and watch the parade. And you can also see the streets, the familiar streets of Jerusalem. This is King George Street, for example, taken in 1950.
And capturing Independence Day celebrations, picnics, and barbecues that go back decades. In addition to acquiring land, KKL-JNF built reservoirs, rehabbed rivers, prepared for housing, and is probably best known for planting trees.
Here we have photographs taken in Martyrs Forest. This is a forest that was planted in the early 1950s that has 6 million trees planted in to commemorate the 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust.
According to Sinai, it's estimated there were around 14,000 trees here when the Ottoman Turkish Empire ended more than 100 years ago.
Starting 1908, we started trying to plant trees here. And nowadays, we're talking about over 240 million trees planted all over Israel.
There's also historic Jerusalem, a photo overlooking the city from the Mount of Olives, the distribution of pasteurized milk to babies, the railway station from 1927, and the Western Wall in 1941, as well as photographs of Tiberias on the Sea of Galilee. Pioneers building agricultural communities called kibbutzim and moshevim, and glass plate negatives used before the gelatin kind.
So this was taken in 1924, and this is Tel Aviv. You can see the sand. So it really is a city that rose from the sands.
Throughout each year, KKL-JNF shares its historical highlights at exhibitions like this one in Jerusalem.
We're displaying photographs 2.5 meters wide, historical photographs of Jerusalem that were colorized.
KKL-JNF says many times when we look back at black and white photos, we tend to think the past was without color. But what they've done in this exhibit is use innovative colorization technology, along with research into the culture and fashion of the time, to color the photos and breathe new life into history. An exhibition also took place recently at the International Expo in Dubai. Many of the photos are now digitized, and the archive can be viewed online in Hebrew, and soon will be available in English. It currently has more than 1 million photos, and like the state itself, is still growing. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, it certainly is beautiful to see where we come from and also find hope to know where we're headed in our future. That's going to do it for us tonight here at Faith Nation. We'll see you next time.